In our final lesson of the unit, we are going to take what we have learned about identifying and using key ideas within a informational text and apply it to some science content that deals with understanding a multi-step experimental process in regards to plant growth. So in this series of questions, we are going to be working through a challenge format where we need to answer each question successfully or answer 6 out of 8 questions successfully in order to complete the challenge. So part of this is just practice to help us learn to identify those key details that we need to ensure that we are understanding and performing the experimental process correctly, and 2, just to give you a review on how to complete this challenge on IXL. Well, let's go ahead and get started. The instructions for how to carry out a science experiment can be found in an experimental protocol. An experimental protocol often includes the list of materials you need for the experiment. The protocol also includes the procedure, which is a list of steps for carrying out the experiment. Some experimental protocols include data tables for recording the results of the experiment. The experimental protocol below is for an experiment investigating tomato plant growth. Read through the experimental protocol, then answer the question below. Now, based on the protocol, the materials that we need are a large plastic container, water, 10 small tomato plants, 10 8-inch pots, 1 40-quart bag of potting soil, and 10 earthworms. The procedure. Step 1, pour the soil into the large plastic container and add water until the soil is moist. Step 2, fill the pots with the moistened soil. Label each pot with a number from 1 through 10. Step 3, plant 1 tomato plant in each pot. Step 4, in pots 6 through 10, add 2 earthworms just beneath the soil surface. Step 5, place all the pots next to each other in a warm, sunny area. Step 6, once a day, give each plant 4 ounces of water. Step 7, after 3 months, count the number of tomatoes on each plant. And then step 8, record your results in the following tables. So here we see our data tables. The plants grown in soil without earthworms are pots 1 through 5, and the plants grown in soil with earthworms are pots 6 through 10. And we are recording the number of tomatoes that grow on the vine in each pot. Now, based on the information, which of the following materials are required for this experiment? Hot water, 20 earthworms, pots of different sizes, 10 tomato plants. Well, to answer this question, we need to go back and look at the materials. So we have a large plastic container, water, 10 small tomato plants, 10 8-inch pots, 1 40-quart bag of potting soil, and 10 earthworms. So first, hot water. Is that required? No, it does not specify the temperature of the water, so that is not correct. 20 earthworms? No, the protocol called for 10 earthworms. Pots of different sizes. Well, let's see what it says again. It says 10 8-inch pots, which means that each pot needs to be 8 inches. So that is not a requirement. And then finally, 10 tomato plants, which is a requirement. There's 10 pots, 10 plants. In our next question, we're asked to look at the protocol again and then answer a series of questions. So, of course, our protocol includes the materials, the steps for the procedure, the data tables. So during the experiment, how many pots will contain soil? So if you look at procedure step 2, fill the pots with moistened soil, label each pot with a number from 1 through 10. according to the information that we were given, 10 pots will contain soil. How many tomato plants will each pot contain? Okay, let's go look at our procedure again. Plant 1 tomato plant in each pot. So 1 plant per pot. How many pots will contain earthworms? Well, we can see this on our data table that it's only pots 6 through 10 that will contain earthworms. So in this question, the answer is 5. How much time will pass between the start of the experiment and the time when the data are collected? If you look at step 7, after 3 months, count the number of tomatoes on each plant. So the time that will pass is 3 months. Okay, let's look at our next question. Which of the following should you do before planting the tomato plants? Select all that apply. So we need to look at our procedures again. If you look at procedure 1, pour the soil into a large plastic container and add water until the soil is moist, and then fill the pots with moistened soil. Label each pot with a number from 1 through 10. Step 3 is when we plant the tomato plants. So, let's see if we can determine what we should do before planting. Count the tomatoes on each plant? No, we can't do that because plants haven't grown yet. Or at least the tomatoes haven't grown yet. Add earthworms to the soil. Anything mentioned in steps 1 and 2? No. Put the pots in a sunny area. No, that one's not mentioned in steps 1 or 2 either. But put moistened soil into each pot is. So this is our only correct answer. Our next question asks, what data are being collected and recorded in the tables? Well, we can see our tables here. The data that we are collecting are the number of tomatoes from plants grown in soil without earthworms and the number of tomatoes and plants grown in soil with earthworms. So let's see which question is correct. Average weight of the tomatoes? No. The average size of the tomatoes? No. Once again, it's asking for the number of tomatoes on each plant. Which variables are kept the same for all pots in the experiment? So, what this is talking about is there anything that we are doing to these plants and pots that is the same for all 10? So our options are the amount of water each plant gets while it's growing, the number of days between the start of the experiment and the time when the tomatoes are counted, or the number of earthworms in the soil. So remember, it's talking about all pots, all 10. So the amount of water each plant gets is the same. It says once a day, give each plant 4 ounces of water. So we know that that is a variable that is the same for all. The number of days between the start of the experiment and the time when the tomatoes are counted. Once again, if you look at step 7, after 3 months, count the number of tomatoes on each plant. So that variable is the same. The number of earthworms in the soil. Well, earthworms are only put in pots 6 through 10, not pots 1 through 5. That is a different variable for the pots. Now, we are asked to complete the following statement using the words dependent and independent. In this experiment, the number of earthworms in the soil is the blank variable. The number of tomatoes on the plants after 3 months is the blank variable. So in this experiment, the dependent variable is dependent upon certain factors. An independent variable is something that is not dependent on certain factors. So the earthworms will be our independent variable. And the reason why the earthworms is an independent variable is because we have determined the first 5 pots do not include earthworms, and the last 5, pots 6 through 10, do. So the first blank will be independent. The dependent variable, of course, is the number of plants. We have no control over that. It's going to be dependent upon all of the factors at play in regards to the experiment. It's going to be dependent upon, of course, the water, whether or not there's earthworms, and so on. So our correct answer is independent is first, dependent is second. Now we are asked to match each item to its group. So our control group and our experimental group. To understand the difference between the two, the control group is just what it sounds. It is the group that we actually control. So we are controlling all of the variables of that group. The experimental group is the one that we're wanting to see if, due to us introducing different factors, to find out what happens. So our control group is the plants that are grown in soil without earthworms. Okay? So the reason that is our control group is because we already know that if we do not include the earthworms, the plant's going to grow as long as we keep it watered and keep the sunlight going. What we're experimenting is, will the plant grow more tomatoes if earthworms are present? So that is our experimental group. And our final question, which question can this experiment answer? Does adding fertilizer to the soil affect the number of tomatoes that grow on a tomato plant? Are we testing anything with fertilizer? No. So we know that's not correct. Does the amount of water given to a tomato plant affect the number of tomatoes that grow on the plant? Are we differentiating the amount of water in each pot? No, because we are told to daily add 4 ounces of water to each pot. Finally, does having earthworms in the soil affect the number of tomatoes that grow on a tomato plant? Yes, the earthworms were our experimental group. So, this is the question we want to answer.